The humans' first journey to the Galactic Council was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. From the very beginning, the trip itself set the tone for what was about to unfold. The massive council headquarters floated silently in the vastness of space, a structure so enormous that even the largest human ships felt tiny in comparison. Its surface shimmered with strange lights that pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, as if the building itself was alive. Ships from countless species surrounded it, each more alien than the next. Some resembled giant crystalline structures floating effortlessly, while others looked like vast metallic beasts, bristling with weapons or glowing with energy fields. The human's ship, by contrast, was modest. It lacked the towering size or exotic design of the other visitors, but it carried something far more important: humanity itself. As the ship approached the council, the aliens around it sneered or whispered among themselves. Many of them had heard stories of humans as reckless, unpredictable, or primitive. Some assumed the humans would arrive full of fear, eager to beg for their place in the interstellar community. What they did not expect, however, was the calm, composed demeanor of the human delegation. Inside the ship, the humans were preparing for one of the most important moments in their history. They were dressed in simple, uniform attire, not the flashy displays that other species used to show status or power. Each member of the delegation maintained a quiet focus. They ran final checks on their communication devices, their ship's navigation, and even on themselves. But unlike other species, there was no panic, no nervous chatter. Every movement, every glance, seemed purposeful and deliberate. It was as if they knew that in this chamber, silence and restraint could be more powerful than words or weapons. When the ship finally docked at the council's massive entry port, a wave of anticipation swept across the other delegations. The human crew disembarked slowly, stepping into the chamber where beings from hundreds of worlds had gathered. The size and diversity of the crowd were overwhelming. Some aliens towered over the humans, their bodies stretching meters high, with limbs and eyes in configurations that humans could barely comprehend. Others were small, delicate, almost like floating lights, but radiated an intelligence and energy that seemed to command the room. The air was filled with strange sounds, clicks, hums, melodic tones, and vibrations that humans could barely hear but could feel in their bones. Despite all this, the humans did not flinch. They walked in formation, heads held high, their eyes scanning the room not with fear but with quiet confidence. Their very presence commanded attention, and soon, the whispers began. "Why don't they show fear?" asked one alien with metallic skin that gleamed in the chamber's light. "They should be trembling," muttered another, a floating creature whose entire body shimmered like liquid crystal. The more the aliens observed, the more they realized that human silence was not weakness, it was a statement. The humans reached their designated spot in the council chamber and stood in perfect alignment. While other species boasted elaborate gestures, holographic displays, or verbal declarations, the humans did nothing extraordinary. They simply stood. And yet, the energy in the room shifted. For the first time, some aliens felt unease. They had expected negotiations, demands, or protests, but nothing came. The silence was heavy, almost palpable. Every eye in the chamber was now fixed on the humans. As the council prepared to begin the proceedings, the humans maintained their composure. Their leader, a figure known for both intelligence and calm reasoning, did not rush or look nervous. Every movement was careful and precise. The human stillness created a strange rhythm in the room. Where others would have made noise, argued, or gestured wildly, the humans offered only presence. It was a presence that carried weight, as if saying, "We are here, and you must see us as we truly are." Observing them, the council members began to speculate. Could a species so young, so seemingly small and fragile, truly be dangerous? Could they possess powers, strategies, or resilience that no one yet understood? Doubts began to creep into the minds of even the most confident delegates. The whispers of mockery turned into quiet murmurs of caution. It became clear that these humans were not like the others. They were unpredictable, not because of recklessness, but because of self-control. The humans' calm was almost hypnotic. Even the most arrogant aliens had to stop and consider their behavior. Some found themselves adjusting their posture, uncertain how to approach the humans. Others felt a strange sense of respect creeping in, despite themselves. The humans had not said a word, had not flaunted any power, and yet they were changing the entire atmosphere of the council. As the proceedings were about to begin, the humans remained perfectly silent. Their eyes, full of determination and quiet strength, scanned the chamber, taking in every detail. The council had assumed it would control the situation easily, assuming the humans would panic or plead. Instead, humanity had arrived not to beg, but to be seen, and in that simple act, they had already begun to alter the balance of the entire interstellar assembly. The stage was set, and all species now realized that the humans were unlike anything they had ever encountered. The story of this first arrival would echo through the galaxy for generations, not because of what humans said, but because of what they did not say, and the power in their silence. The council chamber was immense, stretching farther than the human eye could see. Beings from countless species filled the space, each representing worlds, empires, and civilizations with histories spanning millennia. The air was thick with tension and quiet energy, as every delegate waited for the humans to respond to the council's plans. The humans, standing in their modest formation, remained perfectly still, observing the room and all its occupants. Their silence was noticeable, almost loud in a space where most species used grand gestures or elaborate vocalizations to assert themselves. Finally, the head of the council, a tall, multi-limbed alien whose voice resonated like a chorus, rose to speak. Its tone was firm, commanding attention across the chamber. The council had gathered to discuss a new set of interstellar regulations, and their decision regarding humanity was central to the debate. These regulations were designed to limit human expansion into neighboring star systems. According to the council, humans were deemed unpredictable, dangerous, and potentially a threat to galactic stability. Several past incidents, mostly involving human ingenuity or refusal to obey certain protocols, were cited as examples. The council's proposal was clear. Human colonies would be restricted, spacefaring technology would be monitored, and any attempts to assert influence in new systems without approval would face severe consequences. Some members even suggested more extreme measures, ranging from temporary isolation to confiscation of experimental technologies. They justified these actions as necessary precautions, claiming they were acting for the good of the galaxy. Yet, beneath the reasoning, there was a layer of fear, suspicion, and deep-seated doubt about a species that had shown itself to be resourceful, bold, and unconventionally clever. As the head of the council concluded, murmurs rippled through the chamber. Alien delegates whispered to one another, debating the merits of their decisions. Some felt it was essential to keep humans in check. Others were uneasy, sensing that humans were not the fragile species they had been led to believe. Meanwhile, the humans remained silent, their posture calm and unwavering. They gave no indication of fear, outrage, or submission. Their silence was deliberate, a calculated choice that only heightened the tension in the room. The council expected a reaction. They assumed humans would protest, beg for leniency, or at least try to negotiate terms. But the humans did none of these things. Instead, they listened. They observed the council members' gestures, the way their voices fluctuated with emotion, and the subtle signs of unease that most aliens tried to hide. Every human in the delegation understood the power of restraint. They knew that in a room full of beings who prided themselves on intellect and authority, silence could be more powerful than any speech or argument. Some aliens grew impatient. One, a floating entity that radiated energy like a star, interrupted the proceedings with sharp criticism, mocking humans for their supposed lack of sophistication. They are naive, it hissed, unable to understand the complexities of interstellar law. They will obey because they are weak, or fail because they cannot comprehend our wisdom. The council chamber erupted in a mixture of laughter and murmured agreement. It was a common belief. Humans, small and young compared to ancient alien civilizations, would eventually show their limitations. Yet the humans did not respond to mockery or derision. They simply stood, observing with quiet attention. Their silence was not fear. It was confidence, patience, and control. Every alien voice that sought to provoke a reaction was met with nothing but stillness. Slowly, some of the council members began to feel uneasy. Why did humans remain silent? Why did they not beg, argue, or panic? It was not arrogance, not yet, but something far more unsettling. Certainty and calm in the face of authority. Whispers spread across the chamber. Delegates questioned one another privately. Some wondered if humans had knowledge, technology, or strategies hidden from view. Others feared that provoking the humans could lead to unpredictable consequences. The longer the humans remained silent, the more the council's initial confidence began to waver. What they had thought was control over a minor species now seemed precarious. The decision, which had once felt like an obvious necessity, suddenly seemed fragile under the weight of human composure. The head of the council attempted to maintain authority, presenting data, historical incidents, and projections of human behavior. Yet each argument, each figure, each example seemed to carry less weight as the humans continued to observe silently. It was as if their presence alone questioned the assumptions of the council. How could a species so small be so unwavering? How could they convey strength without words, without weapons, without grand displays of power? Every example used to justify restrictions now appeared shallow or inadequate in the presence of disciplined silence. The chamber grew tense. Some aliens shifted nervously, realizing that their assumptions about human weakness might have been premature. The energy in the room shifted from certainty to doubt. Silence, which had once been interpreted as compliance, now radiated quiet strength. It was a language of its own, and the council was only beginning to understand it. They had expected negotiation, debate, or fear, but instead, humans had communicated far more simply and effectively than any words could have done. By the end of the council's presentation, the humans had not uttered a single word. They had listened, observed, and made the council doubt its own authority. The regulations, once seen as firm and unassailable, now felt fragile, exposed to the calm scrutiny of a species that refused to be intimidated. Across the chamber, aliens exchanged worried glances, realizing that controlling humans would not be as simple as they had assumed. The humans had arrived, and without a single word, they had already begun to change the course of the council's decisions. In that moment, the stage was set for a confrontation not of anger or violence, but of patience, intelligence, and restraint. The council's proposal hung in the air, a decision on the verge of collapse, challenged by a quiet, unyielding presence. The human silence had become a force of its own, one that even the most powerful beings in the galaxy could not ignore. It was a simple act, yet one with consequences that would ripple across the stars for generations to come. After the council had presented their proposal, the chamber remained tense. Silence lingered, but it was no longer the controlled quiet of the humans alone. It had spread into the very atmosphere of the room. The aliens, who had once been confident, began to whisper nervously among themselves. Their words were low, careful, and cautious, because they were uncertain how the humans might react. Every subtle movement or glance from the human delegation seemed meaningful, as if each person's quiet presence carried a hidden message. The whispers started almost immediately. A crystalline being, whose body reflected light in shimmering rainbows, leaned toward a nearby delegate and murmured, "They do not panic. Do you see? Not even the slightest tremor of fear." The other delegate, a tall, insect-like creature with multiple limbs, nodded slowly, frowning. "It is unsettling." Every species before them would have protested or argued. They would have made noise, raised their voices, shown emotion. But these humans, there is nothing. Across the chamber, other aliens were having similar conversations. Some tried to reassure themselves that it was just inexperience, or perhaps a misunderstanding of the council's authority. "They are young," one said, its voice like vibrating metal. "They cannot understand the weight of this decision. Their silence is ignorance." Yet even as these words were spoken, doubt began to creep in. Ignorance would not produce the kind of calm, coordinated composure that the humans displayed. The whispers grew more intense as council members began to notice subtle patterns. The humans did not fidget, did not glance nervously at each other, and their expressions did not betray anxiety or fear. Instead, their eyes were steady, observant, and full of quiet intelligence. Each human seemed to be aware not just of the words spoken by the council, but of the emotions behind them. They were listening carefully, reading body language, measuring tone and intent. Their silence was not emptiness, it was attentiveness. Some aliens tried to interpret this in their own ways. One delegation argued that humans must be plotting, hiding some secret weapon, or some unknown ability that the council could not yet detect. "No species has ever responded like this," said an elder alien with a glowing, elongated head. "Either they are naive and will crumble under pressure, or they are far more dangerous than we can imagine." The room grew quieter as the more cautious delegates considered this possibility. Even the council's senior members felt unease creeping into their confidence. The human delegation, meanwhile, did not react to the whispers, the stares, or the quiet tension in the air. Their leader maintained perfect composure, standing slightly ahead of the rest, scanning the chamber with careful eyes. Every gesture, every movement, had meaning, and yet, outwardly, nothing seemed extraordinary. Their quiet presence was a statement in itself, one that unsettled even the most powerful alien species in attendance. It was clear that the humans were aware of their effect on the council, but they allowed the doubt to grow naturally, without interference. Some aliens attempted to test them. A loud, aggressive species began to mock the humans openly, challenging their right to speak in the council and questioning their place among interstellar civilizations. "They are insignificant," shouted a massive, horned alien, its voice booming like a drum. "Why do we waste time on these creatures? They should obey without question." For a moment, it seemed that chaos might erupt, that the human delegation would finally break under the pressure. But nothing happened. The humans remained silent, their eyes unflinching, their posture steady. The silence was heavier than the insults themselves, a quiet force that made the aggressor pause, reconsider, and ultimately feel a strange form of unease. This moment was a turning point. The whispers in the room shifted from mockery to genuine questioning. "What are they planning?" asked one alien quietly to its neighbor. "Do they have powers we cannot detect?" The human silence had created an invisible barrier, one that words and threats could not penetrate. Each alien in the chamber began to realize that the human's restraint was not a sign of weakness, but of incredible discipline and intelligence. Even the council, which had assumed total control over the proceedings, began to feel pressure. The longer the humans remained silent, the more uncertainty grew among the other delegates. Decisions that once seemed simple, restrictions, regulations, and enforcement plans, suddenly felt fragile. The humans' composure forced the council to reconsider its assumptions about strength, obedience, and power. Were humans really as unpredictable and dangerous as they had been accused? Or was their strength something entirely different, something the galaxy had not yet learned to measure? The whispers became contagious. Aliens who had previously been confident in their superiority now doubted themselves. Each delegate began to question. Had they truly understood the human species? Had their own civilizations underestimated humans' ability to think, to wait, to strategize? The room was filled with tension, curiosity, and fear, all caused by a single, deliberate silence. The humans, meanwhile, remained calm, their leaders' gaze steady and commanding. They did not need to speak. Every whisper, every glance, every silent question from the council and other species served only to strengthen their position. The humans were no longer passive observers. They were silent influencers, shaping the thoughts and emotions of the entire chamber without a single word. By the end of the session, it was clear that the humans had changed the atmosphere of the council. The whispers and doubts had transformed into a quiet respect mixed with fear. The aliens had begun to recognize that humans were not a species to underestimate, and that their silence was a tool of extraordinary power. It was a power that no one had anticipated, and the council, along with its delegates, now had to reconsider their approach. The humans had not spoken, yet they had already begun to influence decisions, shifting the balance of the galaxy with nothing more than patience, discipline, and a quiet presence. In that chamber, Among whispers and growing doubts, humans had made it clear. They would not be controlled, intimidated, or underestimated. And for the first time, the council realized that their decision, previously thought final, might not survive the calm, unyielding force of human silence. The council chamber had been tense from the very beginning, but now something deeper was shifting. The humans' unwavering silence had begun to affect even the most confident delegates. Whispers had spread throughout the room, murmurs of unease threading through conversations that once held certainty and authority. It was one thing to watch humans remain still and quiet, but now the council members were starting to feel the impact of that silence. Their confidence, once unshakable, was showing the first signs of fracture. A senior council member, known across galaxies for decades of authority and decisiveness, finally stood. This being was massive, its body adorned with natural armor that shimmered in the chamber's light. Multiple eyes glimmered with intelligence, and its voice carried the weight of experience and command. It demanded attention as it spoke, hoping to force a reaction from the humans. "You have heard our proposal," it said, voice booming. "You have been warned. What is your response?" For a moment, the room held its collective breath. Every delegate, every alien present, expected some reply, an argument, a plea, an insult, or even a display of submission. But the humans did not move. They did not speak. Their eyes remained calm and focused, scanning the room but not flinching. Their silence, which had once been a quiet curiosity, now felt almost like a challenge. The very air in the chamber seemed heavier, as if the human stillness was a tangible presence pressing against the council. The senior member's voice grew sharper. "You must respond. Do you accept our terms, or do you defy us?" The words echoed across the chamber, reverberating against the alien architecture. Delegates shifted uneasily, realizing that the human silence was not just patience, it was resistance. It was a refusal to submit to intimidation. Some of the smaller alien species whispered among themselves, clearly unsettled. They had expected the humans to plead or beg, but instead, the humans' lack of reaction created doubt. The first crack in the council's confidence became visible. Where once there had been certainty, there was now hesitation. Even the senior member, who prided itself on unshakable authority, found its composure faltering. How could a species so young, so small compared to the ancient civilizations present, stand without fear or argument? How could they remain calm while the council imposed what was meant to be an absolute command? Questions began to bubble, unspoken but felt by every delegate. Some of the council members began to argue among themselves, seeking to reclaim control. "Perhaps they do not understand the gravity of our proposal," said one alien, its voice quivering with both frustration and doubt. "We must remind them of our power." Another disagreed, whispering urgently, "No, do not provoke them. Their silence is deliberate. They are calculating, not naive." The room, once unified in its assumptions about human weakness, was now fractured. The very certainty that had allowed the council to issue strict decrees began to erode under the weight of human composure. The humans, however, made no moves to escalate the situation. Their leader, slightly taller than the rest, simply adjusted their posture, standing a fraction taller, and let the silence speak. Every alien in the chamber felt the subtle shift. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible display of strength, but its effect was profound. The council, accustomed to commanding through words, gestures, and intimidation, now faced a species that refused to react on their terms. The human silence forced the aliens to confront something uncomfortable. Authority does not always equal control. Murmurs of uncertainty spread faster now. Some delegates questioned whether their assumptions about human behavior were entirely wrong. Could humans possess abilities or strategies that were hidden from view? Were their previous judgments, based on what was seen as recklessness or impulsiveness, entirely misplaced? The longer the humans remained silent, the more those questions grew, threading doubt into the council's very foundation. Even the aggressive species that had mocked the humans earlier began to shift. They had expected an easy response, an opportunity to assert dominance. But as minutes stretched into what felt like hours, they began to fidget. Their confidence wavered. Even among the most arrogant and experienced delegates, a seed of uncertainty had been planted. The humans' silence, combined with their calm and purposeful presence, had started to undermine the authority of the council itself. Then came subtle but undeniable changes in the council's behavior. Votes that had once been unanimous now faced hesitation. Proposals that had seemed inevitable were now questioned in private. Allies who had previously relied on the perceived weakness of humans began to doubt their assumptions. The cracks that had started as whispers were becoming visible fractures in what was thought to be solid unity. Humanity's silence was not just a lack of words. It was an influence, slowly but surely reshaping the thoughts and actions of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Even the senior member, whose voice had earlier commanded the chamber, now struggled to maintain authority. Each moment of silence from the humans was a reminder that power was not absolute. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that humans had a strength that was not measured in weapons, technology, or sheer size. It was patience, restraint, and unshakable composure, qualities that, in this moment, seemed more formidable than any display of force. By the time the session was nearing its end, the first cracks in the council structure were undeniable. Doubt, uncertainty, and a creeping respect had taken root among the delegates. The humans had achieved something extraordinary. Without a single word, without aggression, without display of any conventional power, they had unsettled the entire assembly. What was intended to be a straightforward presentation of authority had been transformed into a delicate and unstable situation. The humans left the chamber at the end of the session with the same quiet dignity they had entered. Their silence had not broken. They had instead caused others to break. The council's once firm resolve had begun to crumble, replaced by questioning, hesitation, and unease. The first crack had formed, and the human delegation had done nothing overtly dramatic to create it. It was a triumph of patience, observation, and the quiet assertion of presence, an extraordinary demonstration that sometimes, the greatest power lies not in speech or action, but in silence. The council chamber had grown increasingly uneasy, and the humans were fully aware of the effect they had created. Unlike other species, who often relied on loud words, elaborate displays, or even intimidation to assert their positions, humans understood the power of patience and calculated restraint. Their silence was no longer just a reaction. It was strategic. Every movement, every glance, every slight shift of posture was deliberate, designed to maintain control without uttering a single word. Inside the human delegation, the members exchanged subtle gestures among themselves. Unlike the aliens, humans could communicate silently, through body language and subtle eye movements, a method that seemed almost invisible to the outside observers. They did not need words because their intentions were clear to each other. The leader's eyes would flicker slightly, and the others would adjust their stance, their position, or the way they held themselves. It was a coordinated display of unity and discipline, a silent choreography that sent a clear message. They were calm, they were ready, and they were fully aware of the situation. The aliens, however, could not interpret this subtle communication. To them, the human silence seemed both frustrating and mysterious. Some began to speculate wildly, imagining hidden weapons, secret technologies, or unimaginable powers. "They are hiding something," whispered one alien, its voice trembling with concern. "There is no other explanation for their composure. No species behaves like this without reason." The council, which had assumed that words and commands could easily control humanity, now faced the uncomfortable realization that silence had become a weapon in itself. The strategic silence was working in more ways than one. The council had originally intended to dominate the humans through authority, presenting rules, regulations, and limitations in a tone of unquestionable command. Yet the humans' lack of response destabilized that authority. Every time a delegate tried to assert dominance, every time a voice rose in threat or insult, the humans' continued quietness underlined the futility of such attempts. It was as if their presence alone challenged the very concept of control. The aliens began to hesitate before speaking, second-guessing their own authority. The senior members of the council could feel the pressure building. Normally, They would make decisions confidently, expecting obedience and compliance from younger or smaller species. But the humans refused to follow that predictable pattern. Their silence forced the council to confront a fundamental truth. Control is never guaranteed, and perception of power is fragile when faced with patience, intelligence, and discipline. The human silence was teaching the council a lesson in humility, one that no weapon or rule could convey. Meanwhile, the other alien species observed the humans closely, trying to detect any weakness. Delegates leaned forward, studied facial expressions, body language, and even micromovements. They scanned for nervous tics, a flicker of fear, a moment of indecision, but there was none. Each human was composed, attentive, and completely synchronized with the others. Their silence was not passive. It was active, purposeful, and incredibly powerful. The room, once filled with confident chatter and assertive gestures, now seemed to revolve around the humans' calm presence. Some council members tried to provoke a reaction, raising voices, making accusations, or mocking the humans openly. "They are arrogant," shouted one alien, its voice echoing through the chamber. "They dare to stand before the council without respect, without submission." But the humans did not react. They did not raise their voices or make a counterargument. They remained statuesque, their silent composure a mirror that reflected the council's own uncertainty. Every attempt to provoke them only reinforced the humans' influence, showing that strength did not require aggression, it required control. The strategic silence also created a ripple effect among the other alien delegations. Many species who had initially agreed with strict measures against humans began to reconsider. They whispered privately, questioning whether their assumptions had been correct. "Perhaps we underestimated them," said one, its voice cautious. "Perhaps their silence is not weakness, but confidence. They are not easily controlled, and that changes everything." Even the most aggressive and arrogant species began to doubt their previous strategies. The humans' quiet unity had turned the room into a landscape of uncertainty, where every voice of authority now carried hesitation. What was most remarkable was that the humans achieved all this without making any demands, without threats, without displays of technological superiority. Their silence alone shifted the dynamics of the council. By refusing to react on the aliens' terms, they forced every species to reconsider their own assumptions about power, influence, and strategy. The humans were demonstrating a lesson in subtlety. True strength does not always need to be visible. It can exist quietly, patiently, and deliberately, influencing others simply by the act of restraint. As the session progressed, it became clear that the humans were no longer passive participants. They were quiet orchestrators. Every movement, every calculated silence, affected the council's discussions and decisions. Delegates who had once spoken boldly now hesitated. Proposals that had seemed unshakable were now questioned, debated, and reconsidered. The humans' restraint had created cracks in what was previously thought to be an unassailable authority. By the end of the day, the humans had not spoken a single word in response to the council's proposal. Yet they had achieved something extraordinary. They had reshaped the room, unsettled the most powerful species in the galaxy, and forced the council to question its own decisions. Their silence was no longer just quiet observation. It was a strategic tool, a demonstration of power that could not be measured by conventional standards. The humans had turned patience into a weapon, discipline into influence, and quiet into authority. As they left the chamber, their presence remained like a lingering echo. The council members were left with a mixture of awe, fear, and respect. The humans had done nothing overtly aggressive, yet they had gained an advantage more powerful than any argument or threat. The strategic silence had worked perfectly, and the galaxy would soon learn that humans were a force to be reckoned with, not because of loud displays or brute force, but because of their remarkable patience, intelligence, and self-control. By now, the human delegation's silent strategy had created a ripple of uncertainty throughout the council chamber. What had begun as polite observation had grown into a force that even the oldest and most confident delegates could not ignore. The humans had not spoken a single word, yet every motion, every stillness, every quiet glance carried weight. The council, which had initially assumed full control, was now forced to confront an uncomfortable reality. These humans were not easily dominated, and the longer the silence lasted, the more their confidence and assumptions began to crumble. In a private section of the chamber, senior members of the council convened to discuss the unexpected situation. Normally, such meetings were procedural, focused on refining regulations, making minor adjustments, or confirming consensus. But this time, the discussion was tense, nervous, and full of doubt. One elder delegate, its skin shimmering like liquid metal, leaned forward and spoke in a low, anxious tone. "We underestimated them," it admitted. "They do not react as we expected. They remain calm, composed, and unified. It is unnerving." Another delegate, a multi-limbed creature whose eyes reflected deep intelligence, nodded thoughtfully. "Their silence is deliberate," it said. "Every species we have encountered would have either protested, begged, or attempted to argue. Humans do none of these. This is not inexperience. This is control. And we cannot predict what comes next." Across the council, a few members whispered to each other, agreeing reluctantly. The more they discussed, the more they realized that human silence was not weakness, it was strength. Some delegates began to fear the implications. They questioned the humans' potential abilities, hidden strategies, or undisclosed technologies. "What if they are waiting for the perfect moment to act?" one asked nervously. "We assumed we controlled the situation, but what if they have prepared for every contingency?" The conversation grew louder, more urgent, as uncertainty began to spread. The council, which had once moved with confidence and decisiveness, now hesitated, debating scenarios that had never occurred to them before. Meanwhile, in the main chamber, the humans continued their silent observation. They did not speak, they did not gesture dramatically, and they did not attempt to intimidate. Instead, their stillness created an atmosphere that forced the aliens to project their fears and doubts onto them. Every whisper of speculation, every nervous glance, and every hesitant move was influenced by the humans' quiet presence. The humans had become a mirror, reflecting back the council's uncertainty and amplifying it without ever raising a voice. The turning point became apparent when the council reconvened for another formal session. Normally, this would have been an opportunity to assert authority, finalize regulations, and enforce their will. But the humans' silent presence had already changed the dynamics. Delegates who had once supported strict restrictions were now hesitant. Those who had mocked or dismissed humans in the past were now visibly uncomfortable. The room, once unified in its certainty, had fragmented into doubt, fear, and speculation. The humans' leader, a figure known for strategic intelligence and calm demeanor, stood slightly ahead of the rest of the delegation, scanning the chamber. Each delegate's movement, each subtle change in posture, and every micro-expression was noted. The leader's eyes, steady and focused, communicated quiet command, not just to the human delegation, but to the council itself. It was a subtle but powerful assertion of authority. Humans did not need to shout, argue, or display weapons. Their presence alone was enough to shift the balance. Some of the more aggressive alien species attempted to regain control. They spoke loudly, demanded answers, and tried to provoke a reaction. "You must respond," shouted one enormous alien with tentacles waving in agitation. "Do you accept our terms or defy us?" For a moment, it seemed as though tension might erupt into confrontation. But the humans remained silent, their eyes unwavering, their posture calm. The room went quiet again, heavier than before. Every alien present felt the weight of this silence, as if the humans were daring them to make a mistake. It was in this moment that the council began to understand the true power of patience and restraint. The humans had not reacted to insults, threats, or mockery. They had not displayed aggression, nor had they attempted to manipulate. Instead, they had allowed doubt and uncertainty to grow naturally among the delegates. The human strategic silence was teaching a lesson. Authority and power do not rest solely on words, weapons, or size. Sometimes, strength lies in stillness, observation, and calm intelligence. By the end of the session, the council had reached a subtle, unspoken realization. Their previous certainty, regarding humans as a species to be controlled, restricted, or underestimated, was no longer valid. Doubt had replaced confidence. Speculation had replaced certainty. Even the senior members, who had once spoken with unquestioned authority, now approached every decision with caution. The turning point had been reached. Humans, through patience and silent strength, had forced the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species to reconsider their assumptions. The human delegation, aware of the shift they had caused, remained perfectly composed as they prepared to leave the chamber. There was no celebration, no overt demonstration of victory. Their quiet confidence was enough to signal that they had achieved something extraordinary. The council, shaken and reflective, was left to consider the implications. Every delegate had seen it. A species that could challenge authority, unsettle the most powerful beings, and change the course of decisions, all without speaking a single word. As the humans departed, the council's chambers buzzed with a new energy, a mixture of fear, respect, and admiration. Delegates whispered about the humans' composure, their discipline, and their unshakable calm. What had begun as a simple observation had become a lesson in humility for the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The turning point was clear. Humans had demonstrated that power is not always about size, aggression, or technology. Sometimes, it is the quiet, deliberate, and strategic restraint that carries the greatest influence. From that day forward, every alien who had witnessed the human delegation's behavior would remember it. The turning point in the Council's perception of humanity had occurred, not through words, not through violence, but through patience, observation, and the extraordinary strength found in silence. Humans had arrived as outsiders, but they were leaving a lasting impression. The galaxy's assumptions about power and authority would never be the same again. The Council had reached a moment of tension unlike anything it had faced before. The humans' quiet presence had shifted the atmosphere from controlled authority to uneasy doubt. For centuries, the Council had maintained its dominance over countless species, issuing decrees and enforcing regulations with the assumption that fear, tradition, and authority were enough to secure compliance. But now, all of that certainty was unraveling. The humans had not raised their voices, displayed weapons, or even made an argument. They had simply remained silent, their calm presence challenging every assumption the Council held. The first visible signs of collapse appeared in the senior members. Delegates who had once spoken with certainty now hesitated, their voices faltering mid-sentence. A heated debate broke out over the original proposal to restrict human expansion. Where before there had been agreement and confidence, now there was disagreement, doubt, and hesitation. Some argued that humans were too unpredictable to be constrained in the usual ways. Others suggested that attempting to enforce the regulations might provoke consequences they could not control. The room was filled with tension, as if the very foundation of the Council was shaking. Even those who had once mocked humans were now quiet, unsure how to proceed. The aggressive species that had tried to provoke the humans early on now exchanged worried glances. "They are not what we expected," one whispered. "They do not react like any other species. We cannot predict them, and that terrifies me." Another delegate, a multi-limbed creature with a body that shimmered like liquid crystal, nodded. "Their silence is a statement. We thought they would beg, argue, or yield. But they yield nothing. And that makes us question everything we assumed about them." The humans themselves did nothing overtly dramatic. Their leader remained at the forefront, observing the chamber calmly. Each member of the delegation mirrored the other's posture, their synchronized composure a testament to discipline and unity. They did not need to speak because their mere presence had already conveyed a clear message. Humans were confident, aware, and unshakable. Their silence was no longer passive. It had become a force that was actively influencing the decisions, doubts, and emotions of every delegate in the room. The turning point within the session came when a prominent counselor, known for being strict and unyielding, tried to push through the original proposal. "We must act now," it declared, attempting to assert authority. "The humans are small, inexperienced, and must accept our terms." But before the vote could take place, hesitation rippled across the chamber. Delegates who had once nodded confidently now paused, exchanging uncertain looks. Even those with strong alliances found themselves questioning their own judgments. The room, which had once been orderly and authoritative, had descended into a fragile state of doubt. The humans remained silent. They did not speak, they did not gesture, and they did not need to. The impact of their quiet endurance was visible in every alien delegate's posture and expression. Some leaned back nervously, trying to find reassurance in the support of others, but finding only hesitation mirrored in every eye. Some whispered anxiously to each other, speculating about what the humans might be planning, or whether their calm was hiding unimaginable power. Every attempt to regain control failed because the humans refused to engage in the expected ways. The collapse was now fully underway. The original decision, which had seemed firm and decisive, could no longer proceed. Delegates argued over minor details, debated hypothetical outcomes, and questioned the wisdom of their own authority. What had been a unified front against humans was now fractured into uncertainty and fear. Even the most experienced members, who had once prided themselves on absolute control, were forced to admit, if only to themselves, that they had underestimated humanity. Then came the moment that would define the collapse entirely. Without a word, the humans performed a simple, coordinated gesture. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not watching carefully, but it symbolized unity, discipline, and unspoken strength. This single act crystallized the message humans had been conveying all along. They were not to be underestimated, they were not to be controlled, and they were fully aware of their power, even if that power was quiet and measured. The council, faced with this clear statement, finally began to unravel completely. Arguments ceased mid-sentence, votes were postponed, and the entire assembly shifted from structured debate to chaotic questioning. The aliens realized that the humans' power was not measured in words or weapons, but in control over themselves and the room. The silence that had once seemed like inaction was now recognized as deliberate, precise, and formidable. Every attempt to assert dominance, every threat, every insult had failed. The humans had proven that their strength lay not in aggression, but in patience, unity, and quiet authority. The Council, for the first time in its history, had encountered a species it could not manipulate or intimidate using conventional methods. Even as the humans began to prepare for departure, their influence lingered. Delegates were left questioning long-held beliefs, rethinking strategies, and reconsidering the assumptions that had guided their decisions for centuries. Some species whispered about the humans' courage and discipline. Others worried about what might happen if humans were pushed too far. The collapse was complete, not in chaos or violence, but in the disintegration of certainty, authority, and control. By the time the session ended, it was clear to everyone present that the humans had won without raising a voice or displaying weapons. The Council's decision, once firm and unassailable, had shattered instantly. The humans had demonstrated that silence could be more powerful than argument, that patience and composure could influence even the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and that true strength often lies in restraint and unity. As the humans left the chamber, their quiet dignity left an imprint on every delegate. The story of this day would be told across the galaxy, not for what the humans had said, but for what they had done. They had brought the Council to the edge of collapse using nothing but their presence, discipline, and unwavering silence. It was a lesson that would resonate for generations. Some of the greatest victories are achieved not through force, but through the quiet assertion of strength, patience, and unity. The chamber was quiet now, but it was a quiet unlike any the Council had ever experienced. The humans had left, but their presence lingered in the minds and hearts of every delegate. For centuries, the Council had wielded authority over countless species, making decisions with confidence and enforcing rules without question. Yet, in a single session, humans had changed everything, not with weapons, not with speeches, but with silence, patience, and composure. The aftermath of this encounter would shape the galaxy's view of humanity for generations to come. Immediately after the humans departed, the delegates began to discuss the events, though the tone was far from their usual confidence. Where there had once been certainty and unquestioned authority, there was now reflection, doubt, and even respect. Senior members huddled together, their faces serious, voices low, and movements cautious. They debated what had just happened, trying to understand how a species so young and relatively small could have such an impact. Many admitted privately that they had underestimated humans. Others wondered if the humans had hidden abilities or strategies that had not yet been revealed. The quieter species, who had observed from the corners of the chamber, began to whisper among themselves. "They are remarkable," said one crystalline being, its voice soft but filled with awe. "They have not spoken, yet the entire council has been shaken. How do they do this?" Another alien, a floating creature that radiated faint light, replied, "It is their discipline, their unity. Even without words, they communicate strength and intelligence. We should have expected nothing less from a species capable of such control." Across the chamber, murmurs like this spread, slowly transforming fear into cautious admiration. Even the most aggressive and arrogant species were forced to reconsider their assumptions. The ones who had mocked the humans earlier now looked uneasy, replaying the encounter in their minds. They realized that their attempts to provoke a reaction had failed completely. No anger, no aggression, no threats could shake the humans. The silence that had once seemed passive was now recognized as deliberate, powerful, and strategic. These aliens began to understand that humanity's strength lay not in conventional displays of force, but in patience, composure, and unwavering self-control. Within the council, discussions about humanity changed dramatically. Proposals that had previously been considered firm and final were now being reconsidered. Some members suggested loosening restrictions on human colonies and technology, arguing that underestimating a species that could command such influence without violence would be dangerous. Others argued that humans were now a force to be respected, that attempts to dominate them could backfire in unpredictable ways. The collapse of certainty had given way to careful, measured reconsideration. The council had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans could not be controlled like any other species, and their potential was far greater than many had assumed. Even outside the formal sessions, the humans' impact was felt. Word spread rapidly to distant star systems and civilizations that had not attended the council. Reports described the humans' composure, unity, and silent authority, emphasizing how a single delegation had caused doubt and hesitation among the galaxy's oldest and most powerful species. The story of humanity's influence traveled faster than any weapon or technological breakthrough could, shaping the perception of humans as clever, disciplined, and formidable. Civilizations that once dismissed humanity as minor now began to treat them with caution and, in some cases, respect. The humans themselves, back aboard their ship, were calm but aware of the waves they had caused. They did not celebrate loudly or boast of victory, because they understood the subtlety of their actions. They had achieved far more than a single confrontation. They had shifted the perception of their species across the galaxy. They had demonstrated that true power could exist in restraint, that silence could become a weapon more effective than words or aggression. Every human in the delegation knew that this moment marked the beginning of a new chapter in interstellar relations, one in which humans would be acknowledged, respected, and, above all, never underestimated again. As the humans traveled back to their home systems, the council continued to grapple with the aftermath. Senior delegates met repeatedly to discuss what had transpired, trying to anticipate what humans might do next. Would they exploit this newfound recognition? Would they take bold actions, or continue to rely on patience and intelligence? The uncertainty alone was a testament to humanity's influence. The humans had reshaped not only the Council's perception of them, but also the galaxy's expectations about what a species could achieve through discipline and composure. Among the other species, conversations shifted as well. Diplomats, traders, and explorers began to treat humans differently. Some sought alliances, recognizing the potential of a species that could wield influence without aggression. Others approached cautiously, aware that underestimating humans could be disastrous. Humanity's reputation began to grow, not through fear, but through respect for their strategic intelligence, patience, and unity. Even civilizations that had previously dismissed Earth as insignificant now regarded it with interest, curiosity, and a hint of caution. The human delegation's actions also set a precedent for future interactions with the Council. Other species began to reconsider their assumptions about what it meant to be strong, to be influential, or to command respect. Diplomacy, negotiation, and patience were suddenly seen as tools as powerful as any technology or military force. Humans had demonstrated that intelligence, discipline, and calm composure could shape outcomes more effectively than aggression or intimidation. The galaxy began to learn a lesson that humans had mastered long ago. Sometimes, the quietest voices carry the greatest weight. By the end of the day, the Council was forever changed. Decisions would now be made with greater caution, and humanity would always be regarded as a species capable of extraordinary influence. The human silence had not only shattered the immediate proposals, it had reshaped interstellar diplomacy, strategy, and perception. The galaxy had learned something crucial. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their strength lay not in what they displayed, but in the quiet control they exercised over themselves and the room. The aftermath of this encounter would ripple for generations, a testament to the power of patience, unity, and the strategic use of silence.